Hello, welcome to Pleasure Morsels. I am Susie Showers and I am thrilled to be here with Braun. T is an artist and researcher who creates virtual worlds and performances that challenge hegemonic notions of gender. They're based here in Jojage, otherwise known as Montreal, where they're pursuing a PhD in humanities at Concordia University. Their work explores how queer and trans VR enthusiasts envision the metaverse, create gender-affirming content, and form emergent imaginative communities. They're currently conducting interviews and co-creating virtual worlds with trans artists in the social VR platform VRChat. I'm so stoked to be talking with you about this thing that I know so little about and that's so exciting. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm excited to talk with you about it.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So my first question is for you. How have relationships expanded your own ideas of our human capacity for connection?
Yes, great question.
Thank
Very
you.
loaded question. I love it. I think because this is a world and a technology so few people are familiar with, I'll try and do a very quick summary of what it is I'm talking about. During the pandemic, like all of us, I was looking for ways to connect with people. And the promise that Zoom had of being this great way of connecting us just like did not create the sense of presence that I think we all so badly hoped it would. And I had a friend who played a lot of VR, and this is all social VR I'm talking about. So a lot of folks will have gone into a gallery and put on a headset maybe or played a game, and those are very solo experiences, and you often don't have a sense of your body there. You won't look at yourself in a mirror and see your avatar. You might see like outlines of your hands, but it's very different to be in social VR, which I had some friends. Sorry, cat.
Excuse me, I think we must introduce the cat because she's like a collaborator of yours.
She is a collaborator. She'll probably come back again.
Okay, all right.
She'll reappear. So I got kind of drawn into this world of VRChat, which is the social platform that I use and do research in and hang out in and have relationships in. And what's special about that platform in particular is that the developers kind of created this empty space, and what they said they wanted to do was just let people create things and see what happens. So it ended up being this sort of emergent space of people, like anywhere from like a 16-year-old kid to a super experienced coder could create worlds and avatars, and then you would just hang out and show each other what you created. So it at times feels very similar to early internet culture, where it felt like this vast space where we could just do things, and there weren't, before there were like apps that kind of dictated how we communicated with one another. So I showed up there. I was immediately amazed at how present I felt because I was with other people, because there was spatial audio, because I could like say look in a mirror and watch my movements be reflected in my avatar. It was just really remarkable, even when I was in a place where the graphics weren't super high quality. So yeah, that's like a super quick. Oh, and then like the community that my friends ended up kind of bringing me into is this sort of underground community of queer and trans people who are finding ways to connect with one another, build bodies and worlds that not just like reflect trans embodiment, but I think expand our idea of what it is through this like really wild technology that I think, somatically sort of rewires us in interesting ways.
Right.
What was your question though?
You are answering it. You're talking about our capacity for connection, and I'm hearing that it's open source, it's accessible, anyone can join, and that your own body and witnessing other bodies is kind of creating new neural pathways in your mind.
Yes. Yeah, so then what I started doing was just experimenting with different kinds of bodies. So there are lots of worlds with avatars that people have uploaded, and you can just click on different ones and see what it feels like to be in that body. So, like they're very The platform also reflects, I think, our desires as shaped by late capitalism, like, sort of the ways that we're pressured to fit certain molds. So there are a lot of very femme avatars, very sexual avatars that are kind of Kardashian-esque, I'll say. So, I tried on those bodies just to see, and that did create like a different sense of embodiment to what I normally have. But the ones that felt really interesting and exciting were times when I could become like a slime monster, for example. And
Okay, pause, because I would like some detail about what is it like to be a slime monster as like a big enjoyer of slime things. Please go into detail.
So there's this one great avatar that I like where even when you pull your virtual hands apart, you see like the threads of slime pull and stick back together, and it's shiny, it's bulbous. You also, like in this one, you have long ears and you don't really have two legs. You're kind of like a dress-shaped blob that like slides along. So all of that, like besides being visually interesting, what I found is that it then completely changed my relationship with the boundaries of my body, or opened up like new sensations, like to have my hands pull apart like this and to see the strands. I mean, you might even be able to like get some sensation now just imagining it. So then imagine how heightened that might be when you're in a virtual space, like seeing it in real time, or having somebody else like pull on your slime. Like that's an interesting sensation. So
Wow. I'm like, deep breaths.
yeah, I'm sorry. I know you have a slime thing, so I
I do
really
have a
felt like
slime thing because you're saying what's it like when someone else pulls on your slime. I don't know what question to ask, but I want to know more of like, okay, what is that like? What sensations do you get when another avatar comes in and pulls on yours?
yeah. Well, so there's this phenomenon that VR users call phantom sense. So this is when you see something visual and the visual of it triggers a sensation somehow. Things are visually triggered. Like, some people are like, oh, it's kind of like ASMR, like kind of in that world, or maybe like also in phantom limb world. In that, like if somebody pulls on my slime, I get sort of tingles on the part of my body where that interaction is happening, which can be really exciting and interesting. It can be really uncomfortable. Just also the avatars, they don't have colliders on them, meaning that somebody could stick their hand through your body, or you could stick your hand through someone else's body accidentally, on purpose. So it also opens up all these questions around like, what are my boundaries in this space where there are a few boundaries, where it's so like kind of unregulated and wild and open and free.
And I know that in your work, you are playing with glitch feminism. Is this kind of an example of that, or can you explain more what that is?
Yeah, so I'll try not to get too theoretical, but I'll have to a little. And it's a very accessible book. So I do recommend that everybody read Glitch Feminism, a Manifesto by Legacy Russell. It's an awesome book. And in it, she talks about how, typically we think of glitch as something that needs to be corrected. And most of our online experiences are supposed to be very smooth and seamless, and glitches are often annoying. Like there are some artists who play with glitch art and kind of like try and simulate it, but those aren't often like an unexpected rupture. So she talks about glitches as related to the lives of people in her book, specifically queer people and trans people of color, and the moments of rupture they might experience in their everyday lives, as where the dominant narrative is one of like white supremacy and smoothness and business as usual. And then suddenly we have something like a Black Lives Matter protest creating a glitch in the street in what's supposed to be like a very smooth business as usual throughway. So that's a kind of glitch in that instance. And what the dimension that I'm really interested in So that's like a glitch in kind of a social body or in the idea of the body.
Okay.
But I'm really interested in embodiment and sort of the somatic feeling of a glitch. And VR makes glitched embodiment super visible. So it could be something like one of your trackers gets blocked and suddenly like your arm is like shooting behind your head. So that's a kind of very common glitch. Or it could be something like, pull in your slime and they lose their grip, or they meet kind of the limit of where they can pull on it and it snaps back into place. And even that feeling of like your body being stretched out in an unexpected way. Glitches the sort of like normative contours of our bodies. And I think the expectations that are placed on our bodies, within cis-normative regime. Did that make sense? I know I'm tracing a lot.
It's really fun to me, it's such a new concept. So it just feels really tasty for my brain. And also I'm thinking about my work as a somatic therapist, working with folks to understand their proprioception, to experience, okay, I know that my arm is here because I'm putting it up, and like to play with shaking and pushing and ways that tell you that your skin is the boundary between you and the world, and that it's building safety and trust inside of the body, usually in a world that is not safe or accepting of queer, trans, folks of color bodies. I want to know how, like, what you're describing is kind of the opposite thing of your arm's going to go across the room. So how does your physical body in the material world with now this access to this wacky glitch field?
Yeah. So I'll say, well, maybe that wasn't the best example in relation to glitch feminism. Like, that's a very sort of normal, I call them normative glitches within VR. Like, often, several times when you're in VR, you'll lose tracking and something like that will happen, or your body will twist. And especially if you're looking in a mirror, it can be very uncomfortable and very unsettling to have that kind of experience. Most people, if they spend a lot of time in VR, will start to become accustomed to that and sort of gloss it over or ignore it. So the glitches that I find really interesting are ones that are relational, where I have a new sense of relationality with another person. So, for example, I met my partner in VR. We had, for the first year, I think, like an exclusively VR relationship, and then met in the physical world, but we're long distance. So we still spend most of our time in VR. And some like early experiences I had were of like falling asleep next to her. And for some reason that I still don't understand, my perception became separated from my body. And I woke up and I was looking down at my avatar and at her, and she was talking with my avatar, and my voice was still coming out of it, but I was like, I'm not in my body, I'm not here. But she was like very gently like speaking with me, and I could see her like stroking my face and being like, okay, like let's go bed to our real beds. And then there was also this sensation of watching her kiss me from like being way up. And I felt like I could feel her kissing me, but it was in the sense that my body had expanded and it was a safe container in which to expand. So that I think is also really key. And I've done some somatic therapy work and had a lot of personal issues with boundaries and people crossing them, and really did a lot of work to like feel myself like, this is my body, that's your body. I don't need to take on your emotions, for example. That's something that's been very difficult for me. So I think having done that work and then finding people who could create that safe container for me in this world that also allows for these sort of boundaryless kind of profound experiences is really key. And I've found that not just with her, but within this like trans and queer community in general I'm in, is people really work hard to create a safe space And there's a lot more conversation than in the physical world, I find, around consent and boundaries. And people will even, like, in their profiles say, like, you know, don't touch me without asking, or like, please don't put your hand through me, or will say things like, I love cuddles, like, let's cuddle together. So it's sort of, that conversation is always on the forefront, which I find really interesting.
Well, it's queer, and queers created culture, so it
Yes,
makes sense
yeah.
that you've got containers of safety. Is it early days for this?
Mm, the this platform came out, I think, in 2014, so not really. It became popular more in 2018, and at this point, there are, like, I don't know, maybe like 50,000 users, something like that. Usually about like 10,000 online at the same time, which is really tiny. Like, it's a very niche comparatively. It's a very niche kind of place, and is not super accessible, like, financially, or even, like, you know, a lot of people will find it too uncomfortable, or, you know, it's not even something that is just like, it's kind of in our public consciousness, the concept of VR, but the places where things are actually happening and what's being created, especially in this organic, emergent way, is not part of the public consciousness.
There are definitely people listening who are excited by this idea, whether it's new or not, but might be fearful of losing touch with the material world or with their own physical body by going into VR. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, I would say that's a very valid concern. And in my friendships and in the interviews that I've done with people who use VR a lot, I'd say the conversation around sort of like the downsides or the fears isn't usually quite so specific, but people will say something like, I spend way too much time here, or like, I know somebody who spends way too much time here, or, you know, will just not often take a break for the physical world. So that's very valid, and it's not for everybody. And I'm not even sure that, like, widespread adoption is something that I'd like to see or that I'd be interested in seeing, especially with where the technology is at right now. And I think kind of another dimension that's sort of wrapped up in this question is the kind of like dystopian view that we often see of VR in popular culture, which again, like, is very interesting. And I mean, it's also like a sort of common sci-fi thing where our fears, our deepest fears about emerging technologies, are reflected in that kind of media, which I think is very valid and interesting. So, but I guess I'm sort of here to evangelize, or if not evangelize, to tell stories about the really beautiful and interesting sides of it. And I'll say something else about this also. So I know a lot of people who, for example, have disabilities that don't enable them to leave the house very often, or will have, like, you know, periods of not even being able to get out of bed, or people who are neurodivergent in whatever set of ways we can be. They're huge spectrums, as we know, can't access, have trouble accessing intimacy, or have a lot of trouble with social interactions in the physical world, and will sometimes tell really compelling stories about, like, through virtual cuddling, they were able to be close to somebody in a way that in the physical world is really uncomfortable for them, or were able to develop more social skills. And there's also a community of mute people. They call themselves mute people, who mostly people who can talk but choose not to, oftentimes are too shy, and oftentimes be like very cute, kind of small, sweet avatars, and will run around and be very animated in their gestures, in their way of relating. And I have friends, like, I had a friend that I more recently have talked with them a little bit, but like for the first several months of knowing them, like, it would just be seeing them across the room as this tiny little, like, cat in pajamas, raising their hands and like running over and just like wanting to give me a hug. And that was the person that I still have some of the most intense phantom sense with. Like when I hug them, I feel like I can feel like the flannel of their pajamas and can feel like their joy in that connection. So
talk about capacity for connection.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think it's really transformed my ability to connect with people and my ability to understand the spectrum of connection. Like as an artist, as an academic, my default is a lot of times conversations like this where like, where I mean, you're not talking so much right now, but like where I would tell you about what I'm doing and my ideas, and you would tell me about what you're doing and your ideas, which is like, I love that form of connecting. But I think sometimes I can connect just that way, or that'll be my default, or that'll be my fallback if I'm uncomfortable.
Up in the head.
Very up in the head. Like finding ways to connect with people who don't speak at all and want to have like their head patted for 5 minutes, or want to cuddle, or want to like type something out, or just jump around or play a game with me. And these are people I might never meet in the physical world, or I might see them walking down the street and be like, oh, we have nothing in common. Like, how would we ever connect? So then, suddenly there's this myriad of ways to connect that have nothing to do with like who we are on a day-to-day basis. Much more to do with how we want to connect in that moment and be inventive about the connection.
You're describing so much glee.
There's a lot of glee. There's a lot of glee and a lot of fun. I mean, there are dark corners as well, but like the world that I'm in and the people I'm around, like being there has just opened me up in ways that I would have never expected.
I want to ask you my favorite question that I've been waiting to ask you the whole time. What is your biggest dream VR environment that maybe has or hasn't been programmed or even imagined? I want you to go like as far as you go.
I mean, this is in development, but I'd love to try it. Like full body haptic suits, meaning that you get like often like vibrational feedback in real time, I think would be really interesting. So that's more like the technology side. I would love to see a world where we can build our bodies in real time and like put them together. So that's not something you can do at this point, and avatar creation process isn't super accessible. You need like a lot of knowledge about modeling, and like it can be very complicated. So I would like really love to see something like that, where like one of my arms could be a slime arm, the other arm could be robot, like maybe my torso is transparent and you can see my beating heart through it. Maybe my head is a cloud. Like all of that would be really fun to kind of collage the body, and I think would be a very queer form of body making and communal to do it together. So, and there are like kind of glimmers of that. Like you can see somebody else's avatar. Like I was at a party where somebody was a floating cat worm, and then we all were suddenly floating cat worms, and we're like playing with flying around in the air. So that's great, but I want to be able to do like the stitching together process with people.
I think you deserve one slime arm and one robot arm.
As do you.
Thank you. Maybe two slime arms. Maybe all slime.
Well, whatever you want. I mean, that's a dream. That's a dream.
Is there anything else that you wanted me to ask that I didn't?
I don't think so. I mean, I'll say like I would love for whoever is curious to be able to try out this technology at some point. And I would say like do it with somebody who you feel safe with, who you're comfortable with, who can kind of like guide you through one-on-one way, I think is really nice. And yeah, like I think there's a lot of possibility here. And I think it's also a key moment for people who aren't necessarily coders or 3D modelers or designers, and who like aren't interested in making very polished experiences, to just try things out. So like I would love to see like more workshops around like just building virtual worlds. And I'm leading some workshops like this. I've done some stuff in this field, and I'm just excited to do more and kind of introduce more people to it, and for them to also see like it can be accessible. It's not just for, tech bros. It can be for all of us.
Be for all of us. Well, I feel so satiated from that, and also like hungry for more. So maybe see you in the chat room.
Yes. You can come over anytime, and we'll play more VR. Next time I'll let you be the slime monster.
Okay, thank you. I get a turn being slime monster now.
Yes, it's your time.